Hi everyone, welcome to our Learning Circle, our November Learning Circle, second last one for the year, and a really exciting one tonight, and one that's close to my heart. And it's on climate change education in schools and communities, why and how. And we have guest speaker Peter White joining us on screen there as well. So thank you all for joining, and so lovely to have you. More people will filter in as we go. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. It would be great for everyone to just keep yourself on mute during the presentation. But Peter has prepared a interactive learning circle, so there will be opportunities for questions. So feel free at any time to put them in the chat or come off mute when it's time. And in our online gatherings at A Squared E Squared, we love to have as many people on video if possible. So if you're able, we'd love to see your smiling faces throughout it. It creates a much more warm and interactive online environment. But as we begin, I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge country and the traditional owners of country throughout Australia whose land was never ceded. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures across this continent who have cared for and exemplified connection to country over countless generations. And I'm on Darug country near Hornsby in the north of Sydney, and would love to see in the chat the countries and lands that you're signing in from. So we'd love to see you pop them in there. And something else that we acknowledge at the start of our gatherings at A Squared E Squared is an acknowledgement of the context of the moment in which we gather at a time when the human species, excuse me, the human species is having an unprecedented impact on the planet. We do this at the beginning of our gatherings to remind us that the discussions we have here, the decisions we make, and any actions we take will have consequences for other people and other species, both those living now and future generations. And next slide, Peter. And so just a couple of announcements, reminders before we get to the Learning Circle with Peter. One is that coming up in a couple of weeks on Tuesday, the 25th of November, we have our award ceremony and our annual general meeting of the Australian Association for Environmental Education. So we would love to have you all there. The first part will be a celebration of the Environmental Educator of the Year Awards, and then followed by the association's AGM. So all are welcome. I'll pop a link to the registration in the chat in a little bit. But it should be a fun evening. It's online at 6 p.m. New South Wales time. And next slide. And something else I'd encourage you to do as well is, if you would like to contribute to our online blog, the EE Stories blog. So we're really keen to hear from our members, environmental educators who have a story to tell, whether it's a project you've led, a lesson you've learned, or a reflection on your work as an environmental educator. So that's a blog that we're sharing these stories. You might have seen Amy's great post about who is an environmental educator that was shared recently. So I'll share a link to that one in the chat as well. And we would love to hear your stories if you'd like to write something for us to publish. So we'll move on to our learning circle. So I'm going to just introduce Associate Professor Peter White, who's at Deakin University in Science and Environmental Education. And I'll hand straight over to you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Really great to be here today. Thanks so much for coming along. I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour with you to talk about climate change education and what we as educators want to think about in terms of how we attend to it and why we attend to it, thinking through and beyond schools to our community context as well. So today I'm going to give you a bit of a map for how I'd like to proceed in the next hour. There will be some interactions. So I've got a Padlet there. I will eventually get the link to that Padlet in the chat, which would be really helpful. So I'll do that in a moment. But then we're going to whiz through a bit of information with hopefully some input from you as well. And I'm really happy for you to sit back and listen or to engage thoughtfully. That's really wonderful. First of all, I want to start out with the context of why. So thinking about our uncertain futures and how we gather here today. We've just done an acknowledgement of country, and I will do one again in a moment. But I wanted to acknowledge, I wanted you to play around with the Padlet, have a bit of a practice, and see if you could log in and show me where you're located. So if I move now to the Padlet and get the link that you need to be able to share it, which is where's the link? No, I don't want the embed code. Links, that's where I'm looking. Copy link to Sandbox, that's what I need. Okay, so join me in the Sandbox here. Sandbox is just a new term for a Padlet. It means that I get to have these slides on the side that we'll work through as we go along today. So join me on the Padlet, and if you're elsewhere other than Australia, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we've got a couple with us, it's fantastic. But if you could also locate yourself around Australia, I think that's a really lovely thing to do. I've popped my name in just as an easy way to use the text. So using the text icon over here, and then just selecting your color and putting your name in might be an easy way to go. So thanks to everyone who was able to work that out. Okay, I'm on Wurundjeri country, so I'm over on the east side of the country. And yeah, just would like to acknowledge that I'm on Wurundjeri country. And I wanted to represent that today by thinking with Bullen, our local endemic lyrebird species, and who's a really wonderful feature of the forest that's just up the road from where I am right now. So Wurundjeri Bik, Wurundjeri country, and just paying respects to our First Nations elders, past and present. And so I think it's important as we get going, as Andrew did today for us, is to help us acknowledge the challenges that we're facing. And I love this representation. I'm an absolute sucker for a really great representation. But I like this one because it shows the temperature anomalies from 1951 through to almost now. And I think it's a really nice strategy to just help us reflect on where we are and how change is certainly happening. And we are a part of that change. We are, in fact, if we're honest with ourselves, we are the cause of that change. And so how do we as individuals and of parts of human systems, multiple human systems, how do we attend to that thinking? How do we feel okay about being involved? And that's a lot of what I'd like to talk about today. And as we think about the challenges that we face, I think we have to think very carefully about how do we know and understand what it is that we're immersed in. And so I always appreciate the work that the IPCC do for us. And I really appreciate the 6th synthesis report. It's actually very hard to say, but you can practice that later. And I think it's a really great report. And when the IPCC launch a report like this, they often also provide a media package, which is wonderful because it gives you in very succinct ways ideas about what are the main items that are coming out in that report. And in 2023, this is the warning that came out from the synthesis report. And the warning is that the pace and scale of climate action are insufficient to tackle climate change. And I use that as a backdrop when I'm thinking about climate change, and I'll explain more soon about how I've changed that backdrop over the last little while. But largely, I think we're working towards social reform. And I think that's something that as educators, we can pay attention to because, of course, we're working with our group of learners. and they are current or possibly future citizens, which is fantastic. But of course, we are focusing on building that citizenry to be able to make responsible decisions. Sarah, I'm sorry, I don't really know how to take your name off that spot, so you're going to be with us the whole time, I imagine. But I wanted to make the point that social reform through education is my key focus of what I think we're working towards when we talk about climate change education. And I wonder how that sits with you. I mean, maybe give me a 5 through to not at all. 5, does that feel like it resonates with you in your educational practice, through to not really at all? Give me a show of hands. Yeah, there's some 5s out there. Fantastic. And I really like to see that, because social reform is not easy to work through. And in a lot of what we do at school, we don't get to think about, from our curriculum in particular, we don't necessarily think about the systems that we as humans take part of. And I think that's something we need to work to changing. So I'll be talking a lot about that today. I also wanted to acknowledge that currently we're in amongst it in terms of COP30. My connection to COP at the moment is largely through the OECD, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. But I do hope that you're engaging with what's going on over in Brazil right now. Important decisions to be made, but also this is our political strategies and practices at play. And as educators, sometimes we hold back from talking about politics or being involved in the political, but in actual fact, I think it's central to everything that we do. I'm sure you find in all education contexts, many of the decisions made are small p political. And perhaps we need to lift our sights to also talk about the big P political. So let's come back to our Padlet and just acknowledge that we've got people from all over the place. Fantastic. Look, Turkey, wonderful. UK, and I know we've got someone from Texas here as well. Anyway, thank you so much for playing around with that. And I appreciate that you're in the sandbox, and I look forward to making it work today. So we have acknowledged our context. We are in a time of uncertain futures. We've got a sense of who we are and what our purpose is being here together. So let's move on. I'll come to the Padlet a little bit in the future, so keep that hot and alive for you. I want to now talk a little bit about defining climate change. And I have become recently really interested in the ideas of, well, representation, of course, but graphic illustration. And I have had the privilege of Ray Eckerman transcribing, I suppose, a lecture that I gave to the Independent Schools Association of Victoria. And this is the outcome. And I just think it's a beautiful representation of the stories and the interconnections and the weavings that we talked about for our hour and a half together. And a lot of that is what we're going to discuss and unpack today. So this for me is a representation of climate change education. It brings in thinking about our history through environmental education, our practices in sustainability education, and how we want to think about the now, how we could and should be active in the now, how we build agency for ourselves and our learners learning with us, and how we move into the future. And so paying attention to what inspires us, how we take up action-oriented programs and learning, and how we use that sense of agency in the political space that we're working to. So a little less busy, but very important nonetheless. This is a representation that Ray has worked with me to try and represent the journey that I think we're on with climate change education. So you can see here that we're starting out thinking about the Earth's systems and how they're changing at unexpected rates. And it's that rate of change that's really important that we understand is human induced. So the next part is, while we acknowledge that we live in living systems and we must think about systems as the ecological systems, the earth systems, but also our human systems, we have to think about that negative entanglement, how there are tensions between the systems and how those tensions and entanglements play out, often very negatively for our environment. And I think as I sit in my very privileged Western white position, I need to think about how that plays out in my life and for me as an educator. So I like to think about socio-ecological challenges as opposed to environmental issues. For me, the term environmental issues positions what's actually going wrong out there. And when in fact socio-ecological makes me think about how our society, especially as I said, our Western white society, generates a lot of the problems that we're seeing and how they're expressing themselves in ecological challenges, such as climate change, such as biodiversity loss. We are in the 6th mass extinction. And I think it's really important to acknowledge those situations. I also want to be able to encourage my learners to use data to make evidence-based decisions. This is something we're hearing a lot about in the education system, but not necessarily in a climate context. So finding or being able to interpret and understand a representation is central in this way. To be able to appreciate the challenges that we're facing, like plastic pollution, and understanding the data that's represented about how we got into this situation, to then interpret and start to devise ways that we might move forward. And the moving forward is about taking action. So it's about addressing those socio-ecological challenges at a local context. And this idea of working locally is certainly not new. And it's certainly not new when we think about addressing our global challenges at the local level, but it remains pretty difficult to do in sometimes a community and certainly in a school context. So it's up to us to now start thinking about that. And how are we going to take that on as educators and make the shifts in our system, in our education system and our school systems, and in our learning systems to enable those kind of local changes to take place. I would love to see our schools become hubs of local climate action. I mean, what an incredible opportunity that would afford us across our states and territories and countries. And all of that taking action together is about developing those agency skills, appreciating the political of how we exist in societies, and learning to right size our human interactions in Earth systems. And that right size comes from Anne Polina, our incredible colleague from the Kimberley, who right now represents Australia and the Muttawarra at COP and is doing all that she can to bring a new way of thinking about how we live with our ecosystems. So there are some key elements for me that climate change education do and must and should, all those difficult words in education, must and should, enable us in our learning situations with young people or with our learners more generally. And over the last year, one of the key insights for me has been to not focus on climate impacts. It suddenly struck me one day, how on earth could I expect someone to understand the detail, the complexity of the systems that we're a part of and influencing if all I'm dealing with is just the negative impacts that are coming my way? Yes, they provide some sense of urgency, perhaps articulated in the way of pressure to encourage us to take action, but that actually destabilizes me, it immobilizes me, it makes me feel not like taking action. And I'm confident that's the same for some of you. Anyone feeling like that out there when you constantly get a barrage of impacts? And I think that eco-anxiety is something that's important for us to acknowledge. And so I want to do that by taking the pressure off climate change education to expect learning to happen through focusing mostly on climate impacts. And there's lots of other strategies that we can use, such as applying systems thinking. So we can really understand local socio-ecological challenges. We can learn to right size our thinking about our human systems and how we interact with our Earth systems. And you know, our cross-curriculum priority sustainability shows the way beautifully for how we can undertake this work in Australia. If you look into the details of the sustainability CCP, cross-curriculum priority, it's beautiful. It talks about worldviews, futuring, systems thinking, and design. All the things that are really rich and wonderful about imagining futures beyond our climate challenges. And part of that is, of course, paying attention to the complexity. Often in a schooling situation, I think we reduce and we limit and we make linear the understandings that we're trying to bring to our young people. And in fact, that removes the sense of complexity about understanding how a system is in operation, how it interacts with other systems, how human systems weave through our Earth systems. And without that complexity, I think to our young people, it can seem very confusing as to why more is not being done to change the situations that we're in, to change the impacts that we're experiencing. Now, part of that I'm confident you would see and probably experience on a daily basis is learning how to manage misinformation. So there's lots of great strategies we can talk about how to do that, and I'll get to some of them today. So it's really digging into that complexity, tackling the misinformation in very informed and strategized ways, and learning how to prioritize the political advocacy, teaching ourselves as well as our learners how to speak to power. And that might be something that we do just in conversations with our friends, in conversations with our families, learning how to bring the arguments, the information, the evidence into conversation, as opposed to having the truth or the ideas obfuscated by narratives, by local narratives that tend to overtake and just run with such power. So learning how to use the evidence in really important ways. Thanks, Janine. And then thinking in that speaking to power, how that develops our agency. So we develop agency in ways to be informed, to take action, to work with our communities and our colleagues. Now, of course, some fantastic people around the world have incredible amounts of agency, but so do some of our individuals who are in leadership positions and possibly not making the best decisions for us if we want to think about all species being us and having a great successful future. So there's a lot to go through there. There's a lot to think about. And some of that has come about through our years of working in climate change education, working with young people, and really responding to the ways that these conversations play out in a classroom. This great representation I wanted to showcase has come out just recently. I'm just going to pop the link in the chat. I was going to play it for you, but I think that I'd love to leave that as a treat for you to go on to later. This is Johan Rockström taking us very clearly through the challenges that we're facing right now. And what I love about his explanation is that he speaks global. He speaks Earth systems, but in the language of planetary boundaries, and he does it in a way that I feel involved. I feel like he's talking about me in my backyard. So I really encourage you to enjoy. I'm not sure that you'll enjoy it. It is quite, it's confronting. Where we are right now is confronting. But I think that it positions our language and the ways we want to think about climate change and climate change education really well. Okay, I have a question for you. I would love you to share a bit about your context with regard to climate change. So if you can come back to the Padlet and then come down to our second Padlet in the sandpit, join me here on this page and tell me a little bit about, if you feel like it, the context in which you work with climate change. And I think that will help shape our conversation a little bit as we go forward. I'm going to come back to your responses in a moment, but I'm just going to share some thoughts right now about how I've been working with climate change education with my colleagues, some of them whom are here tonight. Thank you so much for being here. In a science classroom, but also through the cross-curriculum priority and also through the general capabilities and other disciplinary specifics. So lots of different ways of thinking about how we can bring this kind of thinking to our young people, often in a school context. So this work is work that I've been doing at Deakin for about a decade, actually over a decade now. And Russell has been working in this space with me. This website is a great repository that we've built of being able to take our science colleagues, often at Deakin, with their contemporary science and putting it into a teaching and learning context. So perhaps with some video about what the science is, as well as some details around how you might want to take that into your classroom. I mean, just look at some of these incredible resources that we've been able to build over the years. And when I say we, I mean our pre-service teachers. We've often worked with teachers in the field. We've certainly worked with the scientists, so you can see represented here. Sometimes we've worked with Bachelor of Science students who have a real commitment to doing this kind of work and often go on then to become pre-service teachers or teachers through a Master of Teaching. So I really encourage you to take a look at some of these resources and hope that they're useful. We've also done some great work with HyCell, a facility at Deakin University, to think about hydrogen energy and the role that hydrogen plays in the mix as we go into our futures and looking at an energy transition. So let's come here and see, oh, wow, lots of great thinking about your context. So let's see, so carbon literacy, that's really, really great. I wonder if I can move some of these around. Sorry, it's come out this way. I made it a little bit tricky. There we go, thank you. Working with the Centre for Climate Change and Sustainability at University College London. Thanks, Andrew, I think that's you, that's great. Looking at Environmental Education Centre in a pilot program. Fantastic. So someone's working in a Catholic school outside of Brisbane. Oh, there's lots of great stuff. So that's fantastic. I like that we've got a cross between the education practices, so, you know, primary, secondary, tertiary, and also in a community context. I think that's really rich and it adds real value to our conversation today. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to push on now and talk about a little bit of research that we've been doing over the last 3 years and we've got another year on this project too. There's a QR code there if you'd like to come to our website. Actually, I can also pop the website in the chat. Actually, I wanted to show you too, on the last page of the Padlet, I've been sharing some of these resources with you. So I hope that that becomes a useful repository for you to think about at the end. Shout out to Russell and Amrita who are here in the room with me, and I don't think any of my other colleagues. Oh, Fernanda as well. Fantastic. Thank you. So a really, really great team working in this project. You'll see that we're an international team, actually. We've got collaborators here from Finland as well as Taiwan. And we're thinking about how we work with teachers and students, with our students being in years 5 to 10, to take that idea of contemporary climate science and to build it into our teaching and learning strategy. We have a strong focus on student and teacher agency. We use design-based research. We co-design teaching and learning sequences with our teachers, and then we are in the classroom with our teachers as they're working with their young people. We're often interacting directly with the young people to experience their learning and to think about what that means for us as designers of learning. And then we conduct interviews with the learners as well as with the teachers. We've also done a teacher survey to find out how our teachers are feeling about climate change education and what they're doing to attend to the needs of it, with or without curricular support. And we think about the textbook support that they may or may not be using. And we're sharing this through our academic writing. The focus on agency has been really an important innovation in this project, and it's actually been very hard to do in a classroom context. It's really challenging to design the kind of strategies that have your young people feeling like they're building skills and that they're undertaking strategies that are meaningful. And that's when we come to think a lot about that learning to speak to power, about learning to manage politics through an education context. There's a lot of thinking that's needed in this space and a lot of great work coming our way, I think. I could talk to you about the strategies of design-based research. If you don't know about it, but you're interested, please check in and ask. We've got some good writing about that. I can also talk to you about how we design the sequences, moving from framing a socio-ecological challenge through to establishing the science and really building that idea of evidence, to come through thinking about the innovation in the contemporary nature of the science as we layer in thinking with scientists, and then also thinking about our systems. Systems and human systems and how they're interacting, and allowing those complexities to really live in these contexts, and then supporting our young people to be making decisions and to take action, and then to listen to the findings. And so in our work, we've been focusing on year 5 through to year 10. Excuse me. Let's take a little drink while you look at the year 5 sequences we've been able to plan. So you can see that we have been able to develop sequences that come from each of the disciplines that a primary school would attend to in a learning context. Our year 6s similarly have had topics that are obviously curriculum related, but we found really relevant ways to draw out the climate impact, or not the impact, but the climate relevance, I suppose, the climate science. And we're really pleased with some of these teaching and learning sequences and some of the strategies that we've developed with our teachers and enacted with our young people have been quite incredible. Like the Bushfire Manifesto, shout out to Harkaway Primary School for doing some leading innovation in this work with Lee Johnson. And also thinking about climate fiction. We've been using Cli-Fi as a great strategy with our young people, and Fernanda's here and is writing about this with Joseph Ferguson, my colleague. I'm really thinking about the strategies of using arts-based expression to engage our young people in thinking about our current contexts. So this was the challenge that we gave to our young people, and we were really interested in their outputs. There was a lot of dystopian thinking, which provoked us to think about what happens when we get to this binary between dystopian and utopian, and how do we as our fabulous colleague Thomas Everett, who's just publishing a paper in the Australian Journal for Environmental Education right now in the special issue on the meta crisis, he's talking about throughtopian, how we work with these challenges without falling into the binary of good and bad, dystopian, utopian, but using that to think through the situation and to work with what our knowledge and our evidence, and appreciating the systems and the complexity at play. So I really have enjoyed Cli-Fi. We have lots of examples. There's a great, well, I think it's great, I'm biased. Jo and I have written a manuscript also in AAEE about our Cli-Fi findings, and I'd love you to take a look at that. It's embedded in a special issue about climate fiction, which is a really wonderful way to engage any learner and even yourself in thinking through how you're understanding climate. I want to tell you a little bit about our Year 10 program, because this has been a really quite inspirational program. We've worked with a local school, and we've really prioritized thinking with planetary boundaries as a language that's shifted us on from Earth systems. In our curriculum in Victoria, we tend to talk for Earth systems. They're understood as quite discrete systems. Whereas when we start to look at the planetary boundaries, we start to see how interactive and how responsive our Earth systems are. And this way of describing our planetary boundaries as having boundaries, and encouraging us as societies to learn to live within our limits, paying attention to Meadows' work of the 60s, and thinking about what are tipping points, what do they mean for us, how do we understand them, how do we work as a society to pull back from those tipping points. And that's the language that I really want you to hear and be able to listen to when you watch Johan Rockström's video that I popped in the link earlier. And this has been a really incredible opportunity of working across a semester with our teacher and her students in Year 10. And we've used a case study strategy. And Fernanda has worked really hard on developing the case studies with us. And we started out thinking about fast fashion, which is a great example of a local socio-ecological challenge. Our young people are engaged in this every day. thinking about how they clothe themselves, why, what choices they're making actively or not, and how they might be able to change their behaviours and change the system. So not just focusing on the individual and the choices we make as consumers, although we certainly have a lot of power as consumers, but thinking about how we can make changes in our systems as well. So there's more writing coming up about this project. There's a special issue coming out about planetary boundaries in AAEE later next year, and I look forward to seeing that, and I'm sure you do too. So back to some more work we've done with Ray. This is a tool we designed to enable us to think about what is the now, what might agency look like, and how does that enable us to move to a future? Not that we've clarified exactly what our future is, but we've made some suggestions about the kinds of things that will enable a future that is good for all of us, including all species. So there's lots of great examples in here and lots of ways that I'm sure you'll want to dig in. And that will be coming that is available currently on our project website. So that was a quick snippet of the ARC work we've been doing. There's lots of other ways you can engage with really fantastic examples of other academics or researchers who are undertaking this kind of work. Russell and I co-edited a special issue of Research in Science Education, a journal that is with the Association for Science Education Research in Australasia. So I encourage you to take a look in this special issue. There are lots of accounts here from around the world about the ways that science education is being considered fit for the future. So that's the theme of the special issue. And it's about how do we take our science education practices and really weave them into futures enabling education programs. So I really encourage you to take a look at some of these great manuscripts. Some really fantastic authors have contributed a lot of time here. I've already mentioned the Australian Journal of Environmental Education. It would be remiss of me not to. It is the journal of the Australian Association for Environmental Education. It's our journal. It's open access. You can read anything in here at any time. If you're a member, of course, you can access our full repository of all of the now 41 volumes that we've published. We are one of the oldest environmental education journals in the world, and we've got some really wonderful material coming out in the issues, 5 issues that we produce across the year. Thanks, Sonia. I'm currently the editor-in-chief of this journal, so I'm very proud about the work that's done in here, and I see lots of colleagues here with us today who have contributed to this, this journal in really important ways. One of the most important ways is by writing for the special issues. Of course, the other most important way is by using the research that's contributed by our colleagues from around the world and citing that work. So our quartile ranking stays at #1 in the Web of Science, which is always important in academia. Another quick expose of some work that I've been involved with colleagues at Deakin, colleagues named down the bottom. It's a really great group thinking beyond science education, because I appreciate that not everyone here today will have your heart beating for science education like I do, but maybe operating from a different disciplinary perspective. So this project, Artifacts of the Future, is really enabling our pedagogical practices to come to the fore, to think about how do we support our young people to think about their futures in really engaged, hands-on ways where they are creating, crafting, designing, as our cross-curriculum priority suggests, systems that they can talk about with their colleagues. And each of these really fantastic representations take up an idea of something that's challenging in our systems at the moment and talks about or delivers several ideas around solutions. So if you look at the website, which I probably forgot to put in the chat, yes, here it is, you'll be able to access some of these resources, the artifacts, and just really enjoy engaging with them. And in fact, the way we've designed this is to, again, design a teaching and learning sequence that you, of course, can adapt and engage with in your own way and own time. So that was a quick run through some, no, it wasn't that quick, run through some of the examples of how we might do climate change education. And I hope that what that enabled us to think through was the various ways, as well as some of the specific things that we have to think carefully with. I want to spend a little bit of time now talking about agency in the Anthropocene, which comes out of work that's been happening with the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, through PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment. And PISA is about setting a vision for what our 15-year-olds ought to be able to know and do in math, science, reading, and real-life challenges. So I had the privilege of being part of a group of colleagues who worked alongside the science expert group. So these are 8 international academics pulled together to think about what should science education be? What should the framework from which the PISA assessment is then designed, what should that framework say about what we want science education to do for us at the moment? We're lucky in Australia, we have one of those experts in our midst. We actually have them here tonight. Russell Tytler is our science expert representing Australia, which I think is really lucky. Not only, well, there are only 8 of them, so, you know, amazing. So when this group were pulled together in 2021 to start thinking about the 2025 science framework, they were given a mandate from the OECD to think about environmental science and climate change. And the way this group decided to think about that was to pull together an additional expert group, the environmental science expert group, and I was part of that, which was wonderful. So this slide is really just to represent that it's a very complex system of collaborating across several years to come up with the framework that then goes through a process of acknowledgement, I suppose, to then be the document that the questionnaire and cognitive tests are designed from. So it's a complex system. We often only think about the assessment and the data that comes from it, but in actual fact, the framework that designs or the assessment is designed from is one of the most important parts of it. I think it's incredible. You can find out more about PISA from their website. I can pop that in the chat for you. And these are also in the Padlet at the end. And I really encourage you to take a look. They do share a lot of information on the website. It's incredible. So this is the Environmental Science Working Group. Some of you will know Chris Eames from New Zealand, Martha Munro and Nicole Ardwin from the States. It's been a great opportunity to collaborate with some long-time environmental education academics and do something for our fields through the field of science education, which I think is really going to make a difference. So there's lots to reflect on from what we already know from our field of environmental education. I mean, we know it's not about developing awareness. It's not about sharing the information and then imagining that everyone will take it on board and make the changes that we think are needed. So awareness doesn't result in systems change. We also know that it's not about behaviour change. It's not about expecting individuals to make the changes on their own. It's about generating the opportunities for us to work in community, to work with each other in collaboration to change the systems. And I think that's a really important contribution that environmental education has made to our field. We've learned a lot from sustainability education. Our cross-curriculum priority focuses on a lot of those ideas. As I mentioned before, systems, worldviews, design, and futures, all right there theorised for you in our curriculum in Australia. It's just a fabulous position to be in. And now we have climate change education, which again focuses our attention. It doesn't at all suggest that these other 2 fields are anything we should move away from. It just allows us to really focus in on that need to think critically, to think with systems and to think with that complexity. So I've mentioned our curriculum. We could do a cross-curriculum, cross-country analysis, which my colleagues and I did here, and I encourage you to take a look at that. It's a really nice analysis that positions that in our disciplines in our curriculum, we do have content, but often that content is positioned for our Year 10 students, and our Year 10s don't often take science in our schools across Australia. So we are really quite reduced with the ways that climate change is in our curriculum that imply anthropogenic climate change and imply the kinds of systems thinking and hold the complexity that we need. So there could be a little bit of work to do with curriculum. I also suggest there's work to do beyond curriculum, and I'll talk about that again in a minute too. So we're working with young people who I think are necessarily different than they used to be. That picture reminds me to say that. But we also have data from PISA that suggests environmentally enthusiastic students score higher in the assessment. This one was reminding me that our students are politically active and savvy, and so necessarily we have to change the way we teach with them. We have to pay attention to anxiety, and there are numerous tools out there that allow us to do this. There's some great insights that we can have about how to work with young people. In an age of misinformation, what does it mean to be an educator? How do we actively attend to finding the right information and being confident that we're not being misinformed? I think it's really important that we remember that there are organizations out there who are spending millions of dollars to provide obfuscated misinformation, misleading fake news. So it's our job now to learn how to read that. I really love this tool it's called Cranky Uncle. And in fact, the man who designed this is with us here in Australia, John Cook. He has a great book. He has a really nice framework that allows us to think about how we understand misinformation. I fully encourage you, if you're working for yourself or with young people, to take a look at the app, but also he has some other really great resources out there too. So the science framework is available for you to look at. That's in the resources at the end. Have a look at the competencies and think about, does that match the science education that you're teaching or that's being taught for your children or for you in the school that you operate with? This is the science framework as it plays out, and this is where agency in the Anthropocene fits in, which is the bit that I want you to take a look at here, because I think that this support document will feel very familiar to many of you. We defined agency in the Anthropocene, and this, remember, is in a science education context. So when you look at some of these bits, like the blue bits, you might feel a bit surprised to see that this is now considered science education. I hope you feel surprised and also really happy. And this is the key message that I want us to hear today as environmental educators, because this is now embedded in science education. The way that the science framework works is that the science framework is set, and any country who wants to win at PISA, who wants their students, their young people to do well at PISA, will take the science framework and design their curriculum from it. So we can assume, having done this work in the science framework, that our curricula will now change in important ways. So it's about learning to leverage from PISA. These are the competencies that we suggested were really important for being able to be agentic in our current times, which is what agency in the Anthropocene means. We've written about it, but more importantly, the OECD acknowledged how important this work was. And they've now, in fact, this week, are launching the 2029 Climate Literacy Framework, which will inform the next PISA assessment in 2029. And I think this centralizes how important these ideas are and how our young people are being led through their education systems to be able to think about climate change, what their role is in the systems at play, and how they must work with community moving forward. So I'm going to really rush now because I wanted to ask you to think about your local socio-ecological challenges. So back to the Padlet to have a think about the next question here. If you've got some challenges that you're working on, I'd be really interested to hear what they are and maybe to tackle unpacking some of them together. I want to talk quickly about, oh, I've moved on too far. There we go, coming back to this. I want to just talk quickly a little bit about our opportunity in A Squared E Squared to think about how we might move forward together. And that is really to, many of you will remember this project we ran in 2024. We had a lot of activity, some fantastic speaker series, I lost the term, 16 in fact, that were fantastic thinkers in our field, sharing with us their ideas for an hour each time about what's going on in this space. And then we held a one-day summit, and many of you were involved in that, which was really very excellent. And a shout out to Anna and Andrew, who are here with us tonight, who were a part of that. And so it was a very intense year. We went through a lot of activity leading to the summit, and now we're at a place where we want to move on from that kind of one-day event. We've had a lot of supporting organizations feel involved in climate change education and express their allegiance to the ideas of understanding climate change. And our next step is now to think about how do we build that community in a way of focusing through advocacy strategies to work with A squared, E squared, to get some of that political action going that we need to talk directly to our ministers. Of course, that was central in this project. We wrote lots of letters to our ministers and heard back from quite a few of them. And so that kind of work will pick up again. I think also there's an opportunity to follow our colleagues in New Zealand who have developed or in the middle of developing guidelines that sit alongside curriculum and sit alongside additional policy like we used to have, remembering that in 2009, our federal government put together the National Sustainability Action Plan, which was fantastic. It enabled lots of amazing stuff to happen in a school context. But this was revoked in 2010 and has no longer been supported. So that's the kind of additional policy that I'm talking about that we want to build towards. And so this is a project that we can do that through. I've brought this project from the Centre for Regenerating Futures in Deakin University firmly into A squared, E squared, and really looking for opportunities to collaborate with all of us here in meaningful ways to move these ideas forward and interaction in ways that support us as educators in our diverse education scenarios. So early learning, primary, secondary, tertiary, technical, community, in all the ways that we engage with people. Let's do that together and think about how we can build our strategies. So I think we are in a perfect storm of opportunity. We've got and can work towards political leadership. We have experienced practitioners of environmental education and have had for many years. We've got curricula that's in a change revolution right now. We just heard Minister Clare announce that we are in review, at the start of review already. So let's get mobilised and really make the most of setting the kind of curricula that we want to go forward. We've got lots of opportunity to connect with our colleagues not involved in education, but also working in the climate space, who are being political and who are really prioritising that kind of work. We've got some clarity and examples around what good climate change education might look like. We've got great examples of pedagogies that can stretch to include thinking about that policy practice and the action and the building of our agency. And we can let education lead the social reform that I think we need in our societies, in our diverse societies. And I think the time is now for us to feel motivated, enabled, supported, and collaborative in how we move forward. So thank you. And I'll pop my email in the chat. And I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to collaborate or is doing great work and wants to talk about it, or join us in our efforts forward. Thanks for coming out tonight. I know that was a bit of a barrage of stuff, but I hope you sort of find your way through it. And the resources in the Padlet will hopefully be useful. Thank you so much for sharing your local socio-ecological challenges. I'm really looking forward to engaging with them and so much empathy with a lot of those mentioned. But here are those resources again on the 4th page, and I hope that they are in a form that are easy enough to share. Thank you very much. And I'll happily take questions. We've got a couple of minutes. So, Andrew, are there some questions in the chat, or should we just ask people to unmute and ask?
There's lots of love and
Ah,
appreciation coming through in the chat and all the reactions as well. So yeah, thank you, Peter. Just brilliant. We do have a few minutes if anyone wants to raise their virtual hand, come off mute and ask a question.
just Andrew, I see you've asked about the slides that I used tonight. I am okay to share them, but I thought the Padlet might be useful too with a consolidated list of some of those resources. So is the Padlet working for you to be able to copy or engage with those? I hope so. I don't know. Amrita, do me a test. Tell me if it's working.
The Padlet's been a bit clunky.
It's a bit clunky, yeah.
I think there are some posts that you could approve, Peter.
Oh, thank you. Look at that. I'll approve all in one click.
We did have a question just come through from Basak. I hope I pronounced that right. I have a question. What are ways to motivate the schools, especially the school management? I mean, for the district.
Yes. Thank you. Our administrators, such an important
Something?
such an important part of our school system that we really need to think about. And I think this is where I come back to that idea of speaking to power. In the schools we've been working with in our ARC, I've really enjoyed part of the action strategy is to work with them to collect data and then suggest changes to their leadership team at the school. And fortunately for us, and by no accident, certainly been through relationship building, our administration team in that school has been very open to the student suggestions of ways to improve either teaching and learning or policy and practice at the school level. So I think it's about relationship building with administrators in school systems. We have some here with us. Lee, looking at you, we know that leadership of those kind of organisations is not easy. So we're really looking forward to working with our administrators to find ways of enacting local school policy, bringing that curriculum to life with all of the resources we've been talking about today. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. A very challenging issue, hey, engaging with those school management systems. E-Tool.
Oh, yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Look, yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting and very inspirational information. I'm a civil engineer and work with developers, with developing. I work in a council, and we are starting a process of education the developers to actually don't destroy the planet and do the right things. Very difficult to do that. So in a sense, it's the same position as having young kids, which is, obviously the thing, but also the construction industry. We have very sensitive creeks. We have flora and fauna and subdivisions and things all over Melbourne and all over the world. There doesn't seem to be much emphasis. Civil engineers in general, they don't look after, they're not that environmental, put it that way. I'm a very different thing. So I've taken the challenge to do integrated water management to explain. And actually, we've been to a career expo with kids and trying to also do it. So what I'm saying is a little bit hard to buy because every day we get applications trying to destroy things. And when you talk to people, they don't get it. It's very frustrating. That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah,
I suppose we need to start from the children, but then again,
I don't think we have to start only from the children.
Do it.
It is about social reform, and so it's about all of us finding our way. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really hard, I know, from the inside, but it's also really important. And I hope that you find a way to every day feel like you're making a difference in some ways.
No, that's why we say we have an environment here. But what I'm just saying is that the buy-in is very hard. So we're trying to do information sessions in the area, and we're trying to get people and show them the effects. So yeah,
you're doing a great job of speaking to power, which is really exactly what we need to be doing, is taking up. I mean, you just spoke beautifully about a local to global socio-ecological challenge. This is what we're facing in our development space. So this is a great example for us to be taking up and unpacking. And I want to talk to you some more because I think we could do a lot with developing that example and finding ways to move forward.
I'm in the Golden Plains Shire. It's a small shire near Geelong. Other councils are doing very well with circular economy, and we're trying to introduce. They've been a small council, is very hard, but the association of all the councils, it doesn't seem like they're not mentioning that we have to be. There's a few champions around, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, but we work with those champions and we stay with it. And we don't lose heart, right? Educators, that's what we do every day in our school systems.
Exactly. So that's why I joined it's A squared, E squared, right?
A squared, E squared.
And we're very passionate about the environment, actually educating and educating everybody. Of course, the best opportunity to get the younger generation coming in, fill them with good ideas.
Yes.
It's not always easy because they have a lot of influences, but we're thinking how to best explain to developers because they're so profit focused. So we try to work at an angle where saying doing the right thing by the environment actually makes you money, and actually you become a hero and you can sell more property, you can do more stuff. However, we don't know how.
Yeah, I think that's a strategy that's often used in education as well. And we're really lucky in Victoria to have Resource Smart Schools as a program that enables us to work with, I see you, Lisa, that enables us to work with our school administration team and influence them through a utilitarian focus of you'll save money by doing this work.
Yeah.
But we also have to do the work in the curriculum and with the young people to understand why we're doing these changes. So Atul, thank you so much for bringing your example to us today.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate that you're sharing that. And
I'll email you with
you be in touch. Yes, that's great. We've got some work to do.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, and Anna shared a good comment in the chat as well about a program that Surfers for Climate runs, working with tradies.
Tradies.
Another good comment in the chat from Lisa about the Knit for Climate action, and she'll be at the Rising Tide blockade in Newcastle in a couple of weeks. See you there, Lisa.
Well done. Yeah, well done.
So we've hit time now. So I'll just thanks Peter for sharing that screen. Just share with you our next upcoming learning circle, which is in December on Tuesday the 2nd. And this one is Caring for Planet Water, Ocean Literacy and Sea Week 2026. So Sarah Jo, our fantastic Sea Week and Voices of the Water project coordinator, will be running that one. So we hope to see you there. And thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you at the AGM and next month. And thank you again, Peter White, for a brilliant presentation, learning circle. My head is spinning full of all the ideas. So thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone, for coming out tonight, or not coming out, but joining us from your car, Wendy, or from, you know, wherever you are. It's really lovely. I love that I've had Nell sitting right next to Anna in my window from Tasmania. So good to see you. And yeah, good luck to us going forward, right? It's just so important that we be in community, we work together and we support each other. Thank you.